before us. Whatever the obstacles, we must take it in a positive spirit and do the best. Never postpone things for tomorrow. Do it today itself. Use the time fruitfully. In the last session, we learned about the endogenic forces that works on the earth's surface, like earthquake and volcanoes. These are sudden movements. Today, in this session, we are going to learn about the exogenic forces that makes changes on the earth's surface, and the important processes are erosion and deposition. And the natural agents working behind this process are running water, wind, ice, and sea waves. Let's learn more about it. Exogenic forces. The forces that work on the surface of the earth. The two main exogenic forces are erosion and deposition. And the natural agents behind these processes are running water or rivers, wind, and glaciers. Today, in this session, we are going to learn about the work of a river and how it will be make changes on the earth's surface. Erosion and deposition. The landscape is being continuously worn away by two processes, weathering and erosion. Weathering is the breaking up of rocks on the earth's surface. Erosion is the wearing away of the landscape by different agents like water, wind, and ice. The eroded material is carried or transported by wind, water, etc. and eventually deposited. This process is known as deposition. So, the changes happen on the earth's surface because of these two processes. Now, let's learn more about work of a river. The running water in this river eroded the landscape. The course of a river can be classified into three. First, the upper course or the mountain course, where the rivers originates, and the flow of the water is very fast because of steep slopes. Second, the middle course, where the rivers enter the plains. Third is the lower course, where the rivers approaches the sea. We are going to learn about the first course, the waterfall. When the river tumbles at a steep angles over very hard rocks or down a steep valley side, it forms a waterfall. During the waterfalls, the soft rocks undercut by the power of water. There are thousands of small waterfalls in the world. The highest waterfall is Angel Falls of Venezuela in South America. And the other waterfalls are Niagara Falls, located on the border between Canada and USA in North America. And the Victoria Falls on the borders of Zambia and Zimbabwe in Africa. In the second stage, the river enters the plain, it twists and turns, forming large bends known as meanders. Now, let's listen to a small video to understand more about meanders.
Meanders. The course of a river comprises of three distinct parts. First is the upper or the mountain course, where the river originates. Here, the velocity of the water is faster due to the steep gradient. The floor of the valley is narrow and the valleys are V-shaped. Second is the middle or the valley course, where floors are wider and the sides of the valley are more gently sloping. Here, the velocity of the river is slower than the upper stage. Meanders are typical landforms found in this stage of the river. The third part of the river is the lower course, which has a gentle slope and is almost flat. The river channel is usually at its widest and deepest here, because the amount of water flowing within the river is at its greatest. Oxbow lakes are conspicuous features in the lower course of a river apart from the deltas where the river drains into seas. Now we will discuss about what are meanders and how are they formed. Meanders are formed in the middle course of a river. The rivers flow through almost a flat plain in the middle courses. As water flowing under gravity seldom flows straight for any long distance, a winding course soon develops. The irregularities of the ground force the river to swing in great S-shaped curves, forming horseshoe-like loops called meanders. Now let us see how a meander forms. The water in a river channel flows faster round the outside bend of a river due to centrifugal force, whereas it is relatively slow on the inside bends. The fast-flowing water on the outside bend erodes the river bank, whereas slow-moving water deposits sand and mud on the inside bend. At the site of erosion on the outside bend, a steep river cliff is created. The water piles up on the outside bend due to centrifugal force. A bottom current is set up in a corkscrew motion which deposits the eroded material on the inner bank, forming a slip-off slope. In the lower course of a river, a meander becomes very much pronounced. The outside bend gets eroded rapidly and the meander loop becomes almost a complete circle. Gradually, the narrow necks of the loop erode further and intersect each other. Now, the river cuts through the intersection to flow in a straight path. As a result, the meander loop is abandoned and it forms an oxbow lake. The oxbow lake later turns into a swamp and subsequent floods may silt up the lake. It becomes marshy and eventually dries up.
Now you get an idea about what are meanders and how are the oxbow lakes formed. Now let's see how are the floodplains formed. Floodplain. When the river overflows its banks, this led to the flooding of the neighboring areas. As it floods, it deposits layers of the soil and other materials called sediments along its banks. This led to the formation of a flat, fertile floodplain, and the raised banks are called levees. Next, delta. During the last stage or the lower course, as the river approaches the sea, the speed of the flowing water decreases and the river begins to break up into a number of streams called distributaries. The river becomes so slow that it begins to deposit its load. Each distributary forms its own mouth. The collection of sediments from all the mouths forms a delta. For example, Sundarban Delta, formed by the rivers Ganga and Brahmaputra before they fall into the Bay of Bengal. We discussed about the work of river in the process of erosion and deposition. In the coming session, we will learn the remaining part of this lesson, work of sea waves, wind and ice. Now, let's recall what we learned. The forces that work on the surface of the earth are called exogenic processes. The landscape is continuously worn out by two processes, weathering and erosion. These processes are carried out by different natural agents like water, wind and ice. When the river tumbles at a steep angle, over very hard rocks or down a steep valley side, it forms a waterfall. As the river enters the plain, it twists and turns, forming large bends known as meanders. Due to the continuous erosion and deposition along the sides of the meander loop cut off from the river and forms a cut-off lake, also called an oxbow lake. As the river approaches the sea, the river becomes so slow that it begins to deposit its load. Each distributary forms its own mouth. The collection of sediments from all the mouths forms a delta. Here are a few questions for you. Now take your notebook and write it down. All of you write the notes neatly and legibly. Underline important points and send the notes through WhatsApp to me. First question, what is erosion? Answer, erosion is the wearing away of the landscape by different agents like water, wind and ice. Second question, define meanders. When the river enters the plain, it twists and turns, forming large bends known as meanders. Third question, what are oxbow lakes? Answer, due to the continuous erosion and deposition along the sides of the meander loop cut off from the river and forms a cut-off lake, also called an oxbow lake. Last question in this session, how are floodplains formed? Answer, point wise. First point, when the river overflows its banks, it leads to the flooding of the neighboring areas. Second point, as it floods, it deposits layers of fine soil and other materials called sediments along its banks. Last point, this leads to the formation of the flat, fertile floodplain. Here is an activity for you that you can see in your textbook, page number 18. Observe the photograph and identify them. 3 photographs are there. And also you write whether they are erosional or depositional or landforms formed by both erosion and deposition. Do the activity and send the activity to me through WhatsApp. Okay, children?
I hope all of you understood the lesson well. Read the textbook well, study the notes and do the activity. Tomorrow I will send the online test. Before 8 p.m. all of you attend the exam and send it. Thank you, children.